Welcome to Relationship Realtalk, Live the Life's podcast.
For over 20 years, we've been dedicated to strengthening marriages and families through relationship education. For more information about us, you can visit us at livethelife.org.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode. This is a fan favorite, so we had to bring all the men back for another Man Cave episode. So, who wants to introduce themselves, left to the right? How we doing this?
I'm Cameron Briggs. I'm the multimedia assistant here at Live the Life.
And I'm Doug Stevens, and I'm the director of North Florida, South Georgia, Live the Life.
Well, y'all should know me, hopefully. Co-host Alphonso Robinson. I'm the communications assistant here at Live the Life.
And I'm Richard Albertson, president of Live the Life.
And I'm Jimmy Cash, marriage programs coordinator for Live the Life.
I love it. How's everybody doing today?
All right.
Good. Good.
Just like to say, too, that we're missing Tank Ackerman here today. So
Yeah.
Tank was probably the fan favorite.
Fan favorite last
It's either
episode.
Tank or Cam. I'm not sure which. But
For sure. But he's
Well, now we
gonna
can
get-
decide.
yeah,
See how many likes you get.
yeah.
Right? How many people
The
watch it?
viewership, if the viewership is still up, if not, it
Plummets.
was all Tank.
It was all
Yeah.
tape. All right, fellas. So the first question, we're going to jump right on in. Today, we see a lot of young men trying to find their worth or identity from things like work, women, and social media. Have there been times in your life when you have gotten your identity from those things, and how did you overcome that? Who wants to go first?
I'm going to start off simple and say yes.
That's the answer. Yes.
Yes, I have.
And now, want to go a little detail?
Yeah, honestly, what was I not finding my identity in? Young. Like, that's the
Yeah.
real question. Like, I found it in women, found it in sports, found it in my work. I found it in social media of what people told me. And that drastically affected my life and my mental health and my mental capacity. And then, I mean, anxiety and depression do not go away with that. So
For
it's one
sure.
of those things where I had to take a step back, and I'm still taking a step back and still doing that of being like, where is your identity? Where do you find yourself? So
I still
Yeah.
think it takes time too,
Still
especially
takes
since
time.
we're the youngest ones.
For
So
sure.
we are on social media all the time. So stuff like that, you can get caught up in the sauce just a little bit, just a little bit, and it's hard because you want to separate yourself, but then at the same time you feel like, well, I'm young, I should be participating with all the other young people, but it's like, nah. Everything that you see is definitely not supposed to be followed. So
yeah.
Well, and as men, we're hardwired to do something, to make a difference and to, go change the world. And we want to do that. So we get kind of caught up if we're not doing something, we think that we're lacking. And so I had a mentor once talk to me about how we need to have be goals, not just to do goals. So just this long list, I got to do this, and this is where all my accomplishments are, and I got to check all these things, and I'm going to knock it out of the park, and then I'm going to be somebody. And so that's really not the way to focus on it. Yes, we are driven as men to go do things, and we want to make things happen, but having those be goals, what kind of a man do I want to be? What kind of a father do I want to be? What kind of a friend do I want to be? Those be goals, if I focus on that, so I learn to shift the focus over to that, that's more important than my do goals. So that really helped me kind of think about it, because I was that guy trying to get that, trying to please my dad and then trying to please everybody else, to try to accomplish something. And that's a mistake that most of us men fall into.
Yeah.
I think on a personal basis, I think I probably did a lot of that through sports. That was my big deal. I think on the front end was playing through high school and college, and then outside of that, coaching. And I learned early on, though, that my identity had to be rooted in Christ.
Yes.
Or on Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand. And I found that even accomplishments meant nothing apart from Christ. So I think early on I learned that. So I think I was able to get a good base early. And that way, probably my mid to late 20s, I was able to
hone it in a little bit.
Yeah, I was able to walk it out a little bit more because I had a good base.
Yeah.
And the key is believing it, because
Yeah.
you know it.
Yes.
That's
We're
right.
all taught that in Sunday
Right.
school.
Yeah, it's
we
a big
know that's what it
difference.
is. But believing it is a whole different
Whole
ballgame.
nother
That's
monster.
right.
Yeah.
So, as a former law enforcement officer, I walked a beat with a badge and a gun, and so everywhere I went, I was the center of attention, whether I wanted to be or not. And it became real easy to get caught up in the accolades. Because I worked in a community that appreciated law enforcement, and they loved us, and man, they supported us, but the social media likes and the culture that we live in today of building your brand. I know you guys, all about that on Instagram and whatnot. I just would like to caution anyone that's young and coming up to be careful about living off of that, because when that sentiment turns against you, it can be very detrimental to you and your mental health and your self-worth, or at least your evaluation of who you think you are. One of the ways to caution that is to ground, like Doug says, to ground yourself in the Word, and always remember that your identity is in Christ, and it's not in the accolades or the affirmation or the criticism of others. I'm going to lean back on one scripture that is one of my favorite over the years. David was the anointed king. He was not in the palace yet. He came back from a mission with he and his mighty men who supported him. And they returned to a town called Ziklag. That's where they were stationed. And Ziklag was in ashes. All of their property was stolen or burnt. All of their families were kidnapped. They cried till they couldn't cry anymore, and then the men started to conspire to kill David. In other words, they were in their minds thinking, maybe we can make it right with Saul by killing David. It was all about self-preservation at that point. Had David lived off the accolades of those men, that moment would have destroyed him, and they'd have never got back what was taken. But there's an important scripture there that David went back to the high priest and said, "Where's the ephod? First and foremost, I want to pray." And then David, it says, encouraged himself in the Lord. And he didn't have to beg God for anything. God told him to go, pursue, and you shall surely recover all. And that's it for me right there, is that if we focus on God and keep him first, no matter what we're in or whether we're on the mountain or the valley, it'll all work together for the good.
And that's so important. And just to touch on what you said about athletes, because I definitely went through that. Junior year, the injury, you've been told, okay, you're playing this sport, you're trying to move on. So you always think this is your one thing. But then when something happens, it makes you shift focus. So it's definitely important to center your identity through Christ so you can actually know yourself.
So when you went through that, how did you reinforce? How did you reinforce your positive thoughts? How did you reinforce those that structure, that foundation that you stood on, that you were, your identity was in Christ? What did you fall back on?
For me, it was really just talking to God. I'm one of those people, I'll just start talking to myself randomly, but talking to God about whatever situation I'm going through. So at that time, knowing that, hearing the doctor say, well, you're probably going to have to miss the season. So, and that's my senior year. Yeah, exactly. I felt like I got shot. It was a wrap. But my dad was telling me everything happens for a reason.
Right.
And it's crazy to hear that in that moment, because you're like, I don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
But the more he kept saying it, and just the more I grew closer with my team in a leadership outside of actually playing. We got closer in that sense, and I was able to help a couple of them with side personal stuff, just being there and being more so, what's the word I'm looking for? More so like a support system on the team. Like they valued that, and even admitted that at the end of the season. Like, yeah, we know that you were hurt, but the energy that you brought in the dugout, keeping everybody together, even though things were going astray, that was important. And I'm able to sit back and say, God, I see what you did, but I didn't like it at first, but seeing the reactions of other people and how I was trying to still actively help, it made a difference. So.
Right.
Your contribution mattered.
Exactly.
Not in the way you originally thought it was going to
Right.
matter, but over here you realized it mattered very significantly
In a whole different way.
for them.
So I read your question, and on the way up here, I was praying, and I felt like the Lord was speaking to me about, the world is more concerned about what we do. When they ask you, what do you do? It's really, the question is, what do you do for me? What do you do for us? What do you do for the world? God doesn't see us that way. The Lord spoke to me, was like, I don't see you like that. I see what you do for me. I identify you in how you live for me. Are you a good husband? Are you a good father?
Well, I think there can be even some pitfalls even in that, because the Lord and the grace economy, right? It's not about what you can do for me. It's what can he do through you.
Absolutely.
And so we have to be careful, because even as Christians, a lot of times people are like, I don't feel like I'm doing enough for the Lord. Listen, it's God's job to do the job. Like, we just have to be submitted to him. Philippians 1:6,
Yes.
that he does his work through us. And he be confident in this very thing, that he who began a good work in you
He will perfect.
will complete it until the day
Yes.
of Jesus Christ. So, even in Christians, I just think that's what we do. We're hardwired, like Richard said. We're hardwired as men to be like, we've got to do. And we can translate that real quickly into Christianity. Like,
Amen.
like,
And that'll get you trouble too. That got me in trouble, because when we went through our marriage crisis, I'm like, well, honey, I'm working for the Lord. You don't have you don't have biblical grounds to tell me you want a divorce. There was no biblical grounds for a divorce. So therefore she's not following the Lord, because I'm in ministry. And I actually said those things, and that didn't work.
Didn't turn out well.
but I bet they sounded good at the time in your mind.
I was self-righteous.
You thought you were spitting.
Looking for the Lord.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we got to be careful about that. But
Yes.
flowing through that and that identity, you're basically just saying that grounding your identity in how he sees you.
In a kingdom mindset of just of putting God first, just putting God first, and loving others as he loves me. And I can't love anyone if I don't accept his love first.
Amen.
Yeah.
And also, when I swallow the thought that the Lord loves me just because I'm his son, and I don't have to do one more thing for him. I don't have to, save a marriage. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to send an email. I don't have to work harder. And he really had to hit me over the head with a 2x4 several times to make that point. Stop it. Stop doing all that stuff. You can't, all that effort. That's not what's going to please me. I'm pleased just because you're my son.
Thank you, Lord.
And so, okay. And that helped me kind of go back up a little bit. And he still hardwired me to do things, but it's out of the reality of grounded in, I am pleased with you. You're my son. And that. You don't need to do anything else. Oh, and that's hard for us to swallow because we don't believe it. I know that Bible says that, but I'm not sure I really believe that. But until we can grasp that and believe it, we can't go do all those things that we are meant to do.
And to piggyback off of that, and maybe you can dive deeper in that with this next question. There's been a huge spike in men dealing with depression, anxiety, and even suicide. But there seems to be a huge divide in men that refuse to acknowledge their mental illness or swing all the way to the other side and have the mental illness be their identity. How can we address that without ignoring it or glorifying it?
That's so good. Well, and so many of us men, we want to be the Lone Ranger. We want to go through life alone, and that's a lie from hell, because Satan wants us. He loves to get us men off by themselves. When we're off by ourselves, he can pick us off. Real easy to pick us off. But when you've got that cord of 3 strands, it's a lot harder to do. So one of my concepts that a mentor taught me was every man needs a Paul and a Barnabas and a Timothy. We need someone above us that we look up to, that's someone in the faith that we respect and we admire, that's teaching us and sowing into us and calling us out. We need to have the Barnabas that's our peer, that's our peers that look us in the eye and say, hey man, what are you doing? That's not right. We need to change this. We need to, that will speak into my life. And then we also need to be sowing into others. Who are some of the Timothys underneath us that are not as far in the faith as we are, younger than we are, that we're sowing into. And one of the books I read talked about how every man that's been successful in the faith, every single one of them had a Paul and a Barnabas and a Timothy. And the ones that failed and the ones that screwed up and have are the ones that tried to be the Lone Ranger, the ones that tried to do this by themselves. Look at me. And they're having all these issues and all this stress and anxiety and all this pressure, and they're just trying to carry it by themselves. Those are the guys that crash and burn all the time.
Wow, I never even heard that perspective before.
It's one of those things where Ashley brought this up to me, and when she brought this up to me, I never thought about it like this. But when Jesus was walking through the desert alone, God became man, and he's fasting, and the devil's talking to him and everything. And obviously, Jesus is Jesus. He's a God. He's this person that came down. You're like, wow, like this is a perfect person. And what's the one weapon that Satan used against him? Was temptation, because he knew that was his most powerful weapon. And so many times nowadays, especially men, don't see temptation as a big thing. But temptation was the only weapon that the devil thought would work against Jesus. And if it can work, if he thinks it can work against Jesus, he knows it's going to work against you. He knows it's going to get you. So just like you said, it's staying in community, it's staying together, it's staying in fellowship, and not thinking that you have to do this on your own, because you don't. And it's okay to admit that, because no one's going to think you're weak for doing that. If anything, you're stronger by admitting it.
Yeah.
And not finding your identity in that.
And so many men that I talk with, and I'm sure you guys have seen this too, that when I sit down and they're struggling with the depression and anxiety and suicidal thoughts and all that, I'm like, man, do you have any friends in your life? Do you have anybody? Oh yeah, I have fishing buddies. Okay.
That's
You
cool.
have buddies. Who do you have that you can be real with? I mean, who do you have that you can really kind of open up? And it's pretty much 100% of them. I have nobody. Most men don't have other men in their lives to speak into their lives, and that's a catastrophe.
I think that there's a lot of people in communities in the African American community, for instance, that they tend to stay in themselves. I mean, we generally as guys do, but it's even worse in the African American community and in the Hispanic community, and those are communities that I've served quite a bit. And there's this there's this machoism or this rugged individualism idea that says, hey, you just pull yourself up by the bootstraps. And as Richard said, that's such a lie from Satan. And it's all geared towards nobody else is going to look out for you. You need to look out for yourself, and everybody is against you. And it's just, you're being built up with all these lies. And so here's all these lies. But let's be honest, it's people in the ministry as well that don't go and see people.
Yes, for sure.
It's counselors that don't do it.
Yeah.
I realize as
enforcement.
both a counselor and somebody in the ministry, if I don't go to somebody, I am in the danger zone. And so I think it's really important. I think everybody's saying it, but I think it's really important to say, hey, who do you have that you can build into, and who is building into you? You have to have multiple people, and at least for sure that one person that you can tell anything. Like if there's any secret thoughts or whatever, we are being bombarded by secretism. Like who would have ever thought, you go to an issue like pornography, and before it was Playboy magazine or whatever, and somebody hide it in the bush in the woods, and now it's like everybody can go in and they can press private, and they can look at that, and they can be with nobody and then think it doesn't affect anybody in their life. And and so I think those are some of the issues that I see a lot in the counseling sessions. And so these are some great people here to talk about this too. Yeah. And Jimmy, I know you were going to say something.
Yeah. So as bad as it is with certain areas of the community, how much more so do you think it has been indoctrinated into law enforcement?
Oh, yeah. Wow. Absolutely.
Because they take psych exams just to get to an interview to apply for the job.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they have to be psychologically examined.
Experts at hiding.
So
not answering the questions.
Compartmentalizing. Compartmentalizing. I'm in. My wife and I, Angie, we're in a grief share program or class with through our church, and I think it's Pam and Barry Mason. They're putting it on. Man, this is a tough topic for me, because I'm one of those type of people, and it maybe it's because I've seen so much, that my wife describes it like this: that there's a chest inside my head, and it's got a lockbox, and I open it.
Every man has that.
And I put it in there.
Just to what degree it is.
Yeah.
I put it in there, and I shut it, I lock it, and you won't even know. I mean, it's just like I just compartmentalized and I moved on.
Oh yeah.
And there's guys that I pray for in our law enforcement community, because they're struggling, man. They're struggling. I've actually had dreams about some of my friends that just, he won't tell me what he's going through, but I know it, and I'll go to him later and I'll pray with him, or I'll share with him something I'm going through to see if he'll open up with me. But they're hard eggs to crack.
Yeah.
They are. So
Andy Stanley calls it image management. We do a great job of managing the image that we want others to see about us.
yes.
And the best image is the authentic image, and the best image is the image of Christ. But us just being relaxing and being ourselves and made in the image of God. So
Yeah.
And so if there's any man out there that fears that about that lockbox, the question is, who do you trust to give the key to that and open that up? And because that's the healthiest thing you can do. You want to overcome some of the mental illness and some of the stress and the suicidal thoughts and the loneliness. That's counterintuitive, because people are like, oh, no. I'll do anything but that. I'm not going to give anybody the key to that lockbox.
Yeah.
But if you don't give someone the key to
such
that
a great
lockbox,
point.
you're never going to get out
Amen.
of this.
Yes.
Yeah, and there's some things that you'll forget you locked up there.
Yes.
There are some things, like when I went through therapy and talking to people and even talking to Ashley and being at work, something will happen and it just feels like a button got pressed immediately from past trauma.
You got it.
And you're like, why am I acting this way? And then you start breaking it down. You're like, I completely forgot this happened, because as soon as it happened, I threw it away and said, I'm never going to think this again. I never want to feel this again.
You got it.
And if you don't do that, it will blow up in your face one day,
And what's
because you will hurt
crazy-
the people
my
you
bad.
love.
It's only a matter of time. It's always going to hurt the people you love. It's going to hurt them, and it's going to hurt you.
Yeah.
It's going to hurt all of it. It hurts us. We're the ones that pay the biggest price when we lock it up and put it inside another box, inside another one, and more keys and more locks.
Yes.
even when we do the caress assessment, right?
Absolutely.
Dr. Ferguson talks about, our top 3 caress needs. 2 of them are from the past, right? So you're acting through things now because of stuff that happened in your past. And like you said, Cam, a lot of it you don't even remember. And until somebody helps you unlock that, you're like, you're doing something you don't even realize that you're doing it. You're that generational type stuff, and talking about generational curses. I don't know that they're curses anymore, but certainly things can be passed down generation to generation. Absolutely.
Well, then when I look at the men that leave that blank and they just can't do it, I'm thinking, man, that's a box inside a box inside a box. It's just locked up. It's just so locked up. And so I really try to encourage them, man, don't leave that page blank. We're not going to get anywhere if you're not willing to crack it open just a
And
little
especially,
bit.
especially when Ashley and I first did taking out the trash.
Oh my goodness.
I was like, I got so much stuff.
Yes.
And I'm just in tears.
Yes.
Because I didn't realize how much crap I had.
Yes.
It's just like, what are you angry about? It's like, how long do you have? Like, how long can you sit there and just listen to me, be mad at anybody?
And as simple as that skill is, you can't prep for that skill. So you're like,
No, you can't.
you start thinking about it and you're like, oh crap, I am mad about stuff. You don't even think it. You're not thinking it right now. Am I angry? And then somebody asks you, hey, what are you mad about? And if you genuinely look at that, you're like, oh crap, man, I'm mad about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I wonder where it starts from, because I was in a mentoring program in college, and one thing that we always ran into pairing with underclassmen is I don't want to talk to another man about my issues. That was something that every last mentor had to go through. It was just the fact of, I don't want to talk to another man right now about my feelings. So I'm curious to where that even starts.
I think it starts with lack of trust.
yes.
For me, growing up, my mother raised me. My dad was always the provider, the financial provider, and we did real well. But it was my mother. And let's face it, there's some things you don't go and talk to your mom about. You know what I mean? And if you do, the few times you do, you walk away and go, okay, I won't talk about that. So as a young man, you get to a place to where you just figure it out, or at least you think you're figuring it out. You're like, well, I'm going to go with what I know. You know, what we found out later on is we don't know what we don't know. And it comes down to lack of trust. So yeah, that's something. If you don't find someone that you can trust and open up to, you can carry stuff with you into your 40s and to your grave. I mean, at some point too.
Yeah. You can carry them to you in your 50s and 60s and
70s
and 80s too.
That's exactly right.
And I'll say too, that's why I'll always suggest therapy as an option, because I mean, this person's under law to never share anything you say unless it's life-threatening or endangering to you or others. And a lot of times, like therapists I went to, like they don't know anyone from my family. They don't know anyone from my personal life. But they can sit there, listen to everything I say, not judge me, and also give constructive feedback because, I mean, they're also grounded in their faith. It's one of those things where it can be difficult, like you said, to go talk to your mom, to go talk to your dad, or even to go talk to your spouse sometimes because maybe some stuff you have is against them and you don't know how they're going to react. So it's really nice to have that person, that therapist, that body to go sit there and talk to, and then not just be like, okay, cool. All right, cool. Give me $50. It's like, no, they're actually going to sit there and they're going to listen to you and they're going to talk to you and talk back to you and say, hey, maybe you should do this and this and this and this and this. So yeah, that's why I found it really nice.
Terrified to do that. They're terrified to do that with anybody, and so that's something that we have to help men overcome and say, look, I know it's terrifying. We all know it's terrifying. None of us have liked to do that. Nobody just wants to jump in and do that and open up all the. Nobody wants to do that because as men we are terrified. We have this fear that if you really knew me. If you really knew all the dirt and the junk and the inside the thoughts in my head and the thing and the sin in my life, you wouldn't like me.
Right.
So we don't want to touch that with a 1,000-foot pole and we stay away from it. But that's what's preventing us from getting past it and get through it.
And that's exactly what the enemy wants.
Yes.
Is the isolation.
Yeah.
The more you isolate yourself from the body of Christ,
I can pick you off now.
Yeah.
Well, and another part of it is just the pride issue, right? So like when I was getting my counseling degree, okay, I'm right at the very end. I'm going through all the stuff, right? And so now I'm in my practicum part, which is I co-counsel. And so before I did the co-counseling, though, I got to the counseling center and they said, okay, you're going to sit down with the counselor and be counseled. And there was something inside of me that welled up and said, I don't need that. I don't need that.
I would have did the same thing.
But legit, I think that's like what goes through our mind. We think we don't need that. And then about midway through, I'm like, I'm such a sucker. I so needed that. Like the dude was like it was so healing in my life. And like you said, Cam, I do think therapy is a thing. I also think as Christ followers, we have to be careful where we get our therapy from because people can take us down roads that are side roads that we don't need to go down. So that I do think that that's at least worthy of mentioning.
Yeah. So talking about therapy, perfect segue to the next question. From your point of view, what does supporting someone and receiving support look like to you? And which one do you feel like you do more of? Do you give more support or do you receive more support?
I think it centers around that relationship that Richard was just talking about of who's your Paul, who's your Barnabas, and then who's your Timothy. You know, so if you've got those relationships in place, you're going to do more encouraging probably with your Timothy. You're probably going to find yourself being held more accountable with your Barnabas. And then you're probably going to do a lot of receiving mentorship from your Paul.
And I know because I'm in ministry, because we're in ministry, we tend to be the ones that are more the givers.
Yes.
You know, just because of we're on this side of the mic, we tend to be the ones that are giving more than we're receiving. And so one of the things that I with my kids that I have found interesting is that they get frustrated because they're always the ones that are giving. They're always the ones that are initiating. They're always the ones that are, and I'm like, well, would you rather be the person that's just sitting around doing nothing and waiting for that phone call? So yes, it's frustrating, but in giving you receive.
Yes.
So, but it's so that's, I end up giving more than receiving.
I heard a pastor the other day, though, a friend of mine that looked at me and he just asked, he said, who encourages the encourager?
There you go. Right.
And he was hurting. He was hurting at that time.
Yeah. And that's why we have to have our cup filled by that Lord, and by being grounded and centered on a regular basis. That the discipline of that. Starting the day slow. That's really, really important, because if we don't do those kinds of disciplines, we're not able to do the giving side.
Well, and that's one of the things that we do pastors' lunches here, and one of the reasons why we want to do that is because we don't do it just to have lunch. Like we have it that we can have talk time and then fellowship time. And then, like, most pastors are carrying burdens that most people don't even know about.
Right.
And so, but I also know that most of them don't share them with anybody.
That's right.
They don't. And then the one pastor may not even share it with his own wife. So he's bearing even a double burden. And a lot of people don't know stuff like this. And so it becomes this, when part of that chest gets unlocked, it can just flood out, like you said on your, when you were asked the question, what are you mad about? Now all of a sudden you think, okay, I just cataloged 30 things that I could tell you. How much time do you have? So a lot of these pastors are that way in the community as well. So, great question.
For sure.
Did you want to answer?
I would say, it goes into like who's pouring into you, because working in ministry, you can find yourself burnt out very quickly. Just like you said, like having the pastor's lunch, I think that really helps the community that we're in, because it allows pastors to feel like they have a support system as well, and that they're loved and that they're seen and that they're heard no matter what they're going through. Because a lot of times, and I mean, you're your own worst critic, a lot of times pastors think they have to be this person that is, I don't have problems, I have this, I have Jesus and I speak Jesus and I live Jesus, so that's all I need. Truth, it is. Jesus is all you need, but you also need fellowship, you need support, you need love, you need grace. And if someone's going to set up stage and be like, I don't need any of that because like this and this and this and this and this, because I need to be this, because I need to be this, because I need to be this, that's where they're going to find themselves burnt out and just collapsing on the ground, because they're running this race, they're running this marathon that they don't need to race alone.
That's right.
That's true. I think for me, I'm moving more into an area where I'm receiving a lot more support. Me and two of my brothers, we always talk about, we're always the strong friend outside of our three. Saying they moved away because they're a little older, so they graduated and stuff like that. So I went through a period where I'm the oldest out of the group now for the people that are still in Tallahassee. So I found myself giving more of the support, and it is draining, because if you don't pour something into you, you're going to end up empty. And you're going to think that nobody cares about you. You're gonna let yourself go down a rabbit hole, and all you really have to do is just open up and let people support you. So I can definitely say now I'm more in the area where people see that and have recognized it, and they want to give the support now. So I'm more so in that aspect.
I'm definitely truly blessed to have a system with friends and my girlfriend where I can be supported, but they also give me the room to support them when they need it as well.
Exactly.
Yes.
It's a good space. So speaking of girlfriends, how do you ask your significant other to meet your needs? How do you feel like you're allowed to ask?
I do. I mean,
I found myself being very honest.
Yeah. Just long ago, the whole idea that healthy people ask for help is important. So I'm not afraid to ask. I'm not afraid to ask for help. Now that wasn't true 30 years ago, but it is most definitely. It's like almost a reflex right now. So I'll ask for help.
I would say definitely know you and your partner's love languages. That helps a lot. Yeah. Like Ashley knows I am words of affirmation, and she knows that Like I can be going through something, but like her words mean so much to me because I also know that she's grounded in her faith in Jesus, and I know that like what she sees is the Jesus inside of me. And I know for her, like supporting her, I know she loves physical touch. She loves quality time. So I can sit there and I can love her in ways that where she receives the most love and feels the most love. So I would suggest knowing each other's love languages.
And that's a big one. It goes a long way too,
Yeah.
because I know, especially for people that struggle opening up. My girlfriend, she sees, because mine is physical touch, so she might see I'm flustered in the head, and yeah, just that simple pat, just a random pat out of nowhere, and it's
that's
just
all
like,
it takes. Sometimes Ash will be like,
You
"Hey,
saw
by
it.
the way,"
like, that's all that matters.
sometimes Ash will be like, "Hey, like I'm proud of you," and I'm like, "Oh God," I'm like, "Okay, I need a minute."
So it's definitely good to know your partner's love language.
Well,
Yeah.
but I think it's also important to know the conversation and how it needs to go, because healthy people do ask, but sometimes like when you ask, if you ask in a wrong way,
Oh boy.
it can
Yeah.
seem like you're
Yeah.
being very selfish in your love.
Yeah.
And so part of it is you need to know how, because like mine's physical touch and words of affirmation.
Yeah.
And I was very, thank you very much. And I was very needy at times. And I don't want to be in somebody else's lane. I want to be in my wife's lane, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she's going to be my primary love fulfiller. And I should ask. Healthy people do ask. But at the same time, when you ask it in such a way that is almost demanding, or you frame it up in a conversation that doesn't feel very loving, what's meant for good can be now evil, right?
Yeah.
And so you don't want your good to be evil spoken of, even in your marriage. So understand and learn. This is a learning process. You got two people coming together that are totally different.
Totally.
And even in your similarities, you think, oh, we're so similar in some of the ways. You're going to find out how many ways you are different.
Right.
And there are so many nuances, and you don't think alike. And thank God you don't think alike. You don't want to marry you. That would be really nasty.
Yeah.
Like that is just the worst of the worst. So God brings somebody in your life, and there are differences. Well, find out how to navigate those differences. I think that's one of the things that we do a really good job at Live the Life is, at least, we teach it, and then now we have to practice it. Right?
Yes.
All doctors do.
Oh, yes.
All doctors do is they practice medicine. They are not perfectionists.
Right.
We do not. We don't have the corner market on relationship education. We are only practicing it. But when we do it, hallelujah!
It's one of those things. I completely agree, because especially when it comes to practicing it, Ashley sometimes would be like, "Hey, let's do a dialogue guide. Let's do a DTR." I'm like, I don't know if I want to do that. Dialogue guys make me uncomfortable. But I know every single time that we go through some of that, if we have a disagreement, we go through a dialogue guide, stuff that we teach here, like, I know that afterwards I'm going to feel better. It's just getting to the point of like, okay, yeah, sure, let's do it. Because it's, for me, I always feel uncomfortable doing it at first, whether it be a heart-to-heart, DTR, dialogue guide, taking out the trash. I'm like, I don't want to do it. If you gave me the option, I'd probably tell you no. But I know that it's going to be better for me, for you, for us.
Yeah. So I'm probably as closed off as you are, times two. I have to have those cards.
Yeah.
I mean, I do. I do. And I'm not having to use them as much over the past year and a half as I used to. I think we went through taking out the trash for like 2 months. I mean, every time we pulled a card, it was that one.
Yeah.
Because I had like 20 years of suppressed, just junk. When I need something, we sit down. First and foremost, we practice. We practice it. Every morning we sit down congruent, knee to knee. Every morning we hold hands. We may not go through a card, but we will definitely hold each other's hands, kiss each other, and tell God how much we love Him and how much we love each other, and then we'll pray through whatever requests that we need.
Yeah.
So we start our day like that, and in the evenings we'll always spend a quality amount of time together. And if there's a need that's not being met, we'll pull a card. I mean, it can be a DTR, but we're very conscious of how to communicate the right way. and not letting it stay unsettled to the point where it comes off in a hurtful manner or misinterpreted, misunderstood manner. So
as painful as that was to get to that place.
Oh my goodness!
And as hard as that was to go through 2 or 3 months of taking out the trash and dealing with stuff, as difficult as that was, is there any part of you that wants to go back to doing things the way you used to do it?
I love how you asked that. I love how you asked that.
It's a leading question.
But when you didn't have to go through the pain and you didn't have to go through the...
Absolutely, I would never want to go back to where we were. And where we're at now is it's unbelievable how well we get along. There's no number on the chart that I would rate our marriage. It's off the chart. And man, it blesses the whole family. I mean, it does. Yeah. Even the children. I mean, they see it and they want to emulate that with their relationships.
Everyone sees it. Yeah, your friends, your family, your children, everyone sees it.
Yeah.
And most couples don't know how to get there. That's why we're gonna be doing this for a long time.
We were married 17 years and didn't know what we didn't know.
Yeah. So that's part of our goal is we want to have more people find that.
Yes. I'm just surprised, Richard, how few people are in the relationship education field. It shocks me. But then I didn't know what I didn't know until several years ago, and now that I know what I know, and then going to places like NARMI and finding at least a few people, it's like they're looking for the soldiers, and we get 300 of them, and okay, here's where we're going to battle with. But there's so much work to be done in this field that you said people are watching this and listening to this from Africa and Germany and
shout out to Ghana.
Shout out Ghana.
Well, the things we're talking about are universal.
That's right.
I mean, who doesn't need this?
How cool would that be to have Live the Life Ghana?
Hey, look.
Hey.
I'm there.
Whoever you are that's listening in Ghana.
Put that search engine.
Exactly.
Yeah, put it in the chat.
Yeah, search word. Yeah.
Put it in the chat.
For sure, 100%. That'd be crazy.
I love it. Go ahead, finish.
Because I think what you said, like, it's universal, is because, like, and you mentioned it too, like, we preach the gospel without, like, saying Jesus' name. Mm-hmm. But I mean, the gospel is universal. The gospel doesn't know a specific language. Anyone can understand it no matter what language you're interpreting it in. And I think that's what really comes down to is people want to be loved, people want to be cared for, or people want to care. And so that's really ultimately down. Like that's a basic human need is want to feel connection.
Yeah.
So when you talk about it in that way, everyone wants to know about it, and that's just basic Jesus.
Couldn't put in better words myself, my God. So in this episode, we've talked about the pressures of a man, work, and all of this. So when you get home, especially the big fellas here, when you get home, what are ways you decompress from all of that, and just let it go?
Well, I'll go first. Sometimes when I get home, I'll say, honey, I just need to go decompress, and I'll just go in and I'll shut the door. I have a chair in my room, a lazy boy in there, and I put that up, and I just.
Now daggone well the way you decompress is getting ice cream.
That's what good too.
Hey, that's off the podcast.
Richard gonna be like, duh.
He's like, you put Bluebell.
I had just got done a really hard intensive up in Georgia, and I called Richard just to, because man, if you don't talk to somebody after something like that, it just not that you share all the individual stuff, but Richard said, "Hey man, you just need to stop somewhere and get some ice cream."
And you might need 2 scoops.
Yeah, that's exactly what he said.
Yeah, you deserve 2 scoops.
The more stressful it was, the more scoops you're gonna need. Yeah.
I get in my pool.
Funny.
Yeah.
I get in my pool.
Once he gets stuck.
I do. I just get in my pool and I just woosah. It's
well,
good.
I'm very fortunate that I have a wife that provides a very soft place to land.
Yes.
Coming home to Elizabeth is so wonderful because y'all know her. She's so sweet and loving and kind, and what you see that's really who she is. I mean, she is like that all the time. And I cannot believe how lucky I am, Oh my gosh, that she provides that soft place because it's easy to decompress with Elizabeth.
Yeah. I probably I'm either gonna like sit down and watch a little sports, or I'll take like a quick power nap to just, like
That's the one.
just
Yeah.
just get just slowing everything down, man. Like I just every once in a while, like my life is fast paced, and I do a lot of ministry stuff, and people are calling all the time. So it always feels like, having 7 kids, you get, Dad,
Oh, wow.
Dad,
Yeah.
Dad.
Yeah.
That's what I feel like in regular life. Like, hey, Doug. And so if I don't talk to people, or like, if I don't get my rest, then like I'm no good. And what good am I going to do if I'm running on empty or fumes all the time? That's just going to break me down. And somebody says, well, how can you do all that stuff, man? Just get rest. And it's that yoke trading with Jesus. I mean, his burden, right?
All right.
Is light. Ours that we have is heavy. Which would you rather have?
Yes.
And I'd rather have his light burden. And so he invites us to trade with him. And so I think that whenever you frame that question up, I think, because there's going to be people that listen to the podcast that are not believers, and they're like, okay, I don't even understand what are benefits to this. And one of the great benefits of being a believer, besides heaven being your home and having a relationship with Jesus, is that I don't have to bear my burdens anymore. I don't have to carry this load that we carry as men. I'm able to give that back at the feet of Jesus, and I don't need to take it back, although I will say I was an expert for a really long time at taking it back. I would give it to him, and then I would say, that looks pretty good. Let me take it back.
Yeah.
And but I think that we get better at that, maybe with some age and some practice and some, is that old Dr. Phil saying, how's that working out for you?
Yeah.
You do it and you're not, it's not good for you,
Yeah.
and you feel that it's not good for you, and you're like, okay, I need to do something about this.
Yeah.
How much you can?
I'll honestly go in my room and I'll play Xbox. I'll scroll on social media for a little bit just to like see some funny stuff, like you said, watch some sports stuff. And that really does just help me, like, okay, like it helps me go from work to I can now relax.
A good transitional period.
Yeah, and it's really nice having someone like Ashley in my life where I can be like, hey, I'm gonna spend the next hour playing Xbox with some friends. And she's like, okay, completely understand. Have a great time. And she gives me that space to relax. She gives me that space to decompress and say, okay, cool. But also what's amazing about her is she doesn't let me stay in that space of like, okay, like you need to get out of that now. Like it's awesome
your
to
hour,
relax. Yeah, it's awesome to relax, but also know that, you can't stay in that forever.
You gotta get them moving. But even finding something, how you were saying, you depleted at the end of the day, it's so important to actually get that rest and take care of yourself, especially for the younger people listening. Because if I have something to do, I'm not sleeping until it gets done, and you can't live like that at all, because you wake up.
What I found interesting on that, Alphonso, is that your generation is feeling the stress more than any generation.
Yeah,
and that's interesting to me, because I feel like maybe some of the generations before maybe even worked harder and longer. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know that that's true, but I do know that this generation is feeling the stress. And so what are some great ways to deal with stress? I know a lot of it is what we talked about, being accountable and talking to somebody and having a plan.
Many vacations.
I'm learning that
many
with Live the
just
Life.
getaways, just little 3-day pack up 5 o'clock Friday, come back Sunday night, and it doesn't have to cost a lot of money. We live in Florida. There's 100 places to go that is new.
We get discounts because you live in the state.
Exactly.
So,
Like Universal, Disney, they give in-state discounts.
There's a new roller coaster I hear, the Velociraptor or whatever. In,
You
Universal.
can bet your bottom dollar.
I love that's so relaxing to some of you, but I hear that and I hear stress. Are you kidding me? Now, if you said, "Hey, let's go to a Washington football team game or something like that," I'm like, "All right, let's go."
Yes.
But
that's growth for saying football team.
Yeah. Well,
I can tell you why our generation feels all that stress is because our media gives it to us like a fire hydrant.
Yes.
Of just like, as soon as something happens, boom, here's all that information that you want about it. whether it be right, wrong, like no matter what it is, whether you're talking to someone who is on the side, against the side, or just neutral, you get that information instantly. Like we immediately knew that, oh, all this stuff's happening in Afghanistan. You immediately know like, oh, all this stuff, like back in January, there's a riot in the Capitol. You know all that stuff, and a lot of people nowadays, they're become ultra sensitive to it, and they become this person that like feels like they need to solve everything, and then it kills them because they can't solve everything, and it becomes this huge problem for a lot of people in our generation nowadays because you get force fed everything.
They try to solve, or because they seen the work that the older generations have done, and they don't want to do that at all. So it's definitely a weird common ground. But for the young people, you have to rest, eat, and go to sleep. Yeah. Like that. And it's crazy me saying it out loud, but living the fast-paced life that we do live, you have to. It's so important, because if you don't get the energy and the rest, and I was telling my girlfriend this the other day, it's like when I come home, because I'm not putting sleep and stuff first, I wake up, come to work, I was at work. Now I'm really tired because I'm drained completely, because you barely get enough sleep. You got to muster up, okay, I got to get in front of people. So now that's a whole bunch of energy you're wasting. And then when you get home, you're not giving your loved ones or the people you care about.
Yeah, I was just about to say, like, if you're sitting there doing all that and you're running on E all day, you get home and you're like, I want to relax. And if you have a wife or a husband who's like, I'm ready for time with you, and you can't give that to them, that can be very frustrating for a relationship of like, you're my wife, you're my husband, like I want to be with you, I love you, I chose you. Why can't you come home from work at 6 p.m. and have dinner with me, sit down and talk about our days and just communicate with each other, instead of being like, I'm gonna microwave something and go to sleep. I'm like, no.
Well, I think it goes back to what Richard said in the very beginning. You know, there's a list of do's that you can do, and there's a list of B's. And then, you know, I heard a message early on in one of my chapel messages in college: to be or not to be, that is the question. And so I think we need to spend time being. And I also think it's worthy of saying that we don't have to agree with everybody on everything. Like your generation sees the 3 different things, and you're definitely for, you're definitely against, you know, and you don't have to be that. You can just hear somebody else's perspective without like just totally like
condemning them.
Yes, like we're in this. We can say, you know, vaccine, and then all of a sudden, like everybody's like, already posturing themselves. It's like, you know, like what you trying to say? I don't believe that you think like that.
You saying I should get a vaccine?
Right.
It's like, what? No.
You can talk about any system or anything that's like that. You can talk about religion and or you know, something like abortion or things like that, and it's okay that you don't agree or think exactly like I do. And I think if that would probably take a lot of stress off if you didn't sit there and have to. It's a form of winning, right? Like in your mind, if you don't believe like I do, you lose. You know, and I think we kind of penalize people with that. So I just think relationally, we just need to temper it down, be able to hear people's perspectives, and when you hear people's perspectives, you don't have to win. You don't have to win.
You don't have to agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. Completely agree.
How much of that is attributed to maybe our generation, Doug? Maybe we didn't do a good job with providing an example for the younger guys to learn how to listen.
Well, it's absolutely that. That's why Alphonso said earlier, we see what your generation did, and that's why the younger generation, and I know that's why we did a terrible job of listening. First of all, we stood to our guns without telling why. Why was because I said so. That's why, and that's what we heard as well. But we didn't help in that process, and that's just my personal opinion. But I think we've done a terrible job as a generation. Not maybe some individuals. Some you might have somebody that did a great job, you know, explaining it. But I think that's what we need to get back to, and that's why guys our age can be with guys in this generation and younger. Like, I mean, going in teaching in middle school and high school, you can still be an effective teacher in your 60s and in your 70s. All you have to do is be able to relate and be able to speak their language, not just your language.
Right.
So.
Right.
Well, I loved all the input we had today, fellas. Great episode. Great episode. Just a quick reminder that we are now offering free classes in Florida for our AIM program. So if you are interested, please be sure to reach out to us on social media, and our website, www.livethelife.org. And thanks for listening, everyone. I hope you feel educated, encouraged, and empowered to thrive in whatever relationship you're in.